India had surpassed China, Europe, and every other buyer. It was now Russia's largest energy partner, not quietly, not reluctantly, but decisively. It wasn't just about crude oil, it was about recalibrating the entire global energy architecture, challenging the dollar's supremacy, creating new payment systems in rupees and rubles, and building long-term security beyond Western sanctions. The United States intensified pressure. Warnings were delivered. Media narratives painted India's decision as reckless. Think tanks predicted doom. Editorials lectured on responsibility. But the world no longer listened with the old reverence. Oil was the backbone of economic expansion: transport, agriculture, manufacturing, aviation, housing, technology. Cheap energy meant stronger infrastructure, lower inflation, more investment, faster growth. India could not afford to pay Western inflated prices in the name of political alignment. And so the tankers kept moving. Dozens at first, then scores, then hundreds. Indian refineries operated at record capacity. Petrochemical plants expanded. Fuel prices stabilized. Manufacturing gained momentum. And the nation's economic engines roared louder, powered by decisions the West could neither influence nor control. Across Africa, policymakers saw India as a mirror of what independent decision-making could achieve. Partnerships deepened: technology, agriculture, digital payments, solar infrastructure, pharmaceuticals. Africa realized that the global South could transform from a block of vulnerability into a block of strategy. India and Russia pushed forward a currency settlement mechanism, bypassing Western systems. Trade in national currencies grew, proving that major economies could operate without the dollar. The unipolar era was ending. Multipolarity was no longer theory, it was practice. The United States escalated pressure further, warning of sanctions and diplomatic isolation. India did not flinch. "We will not allow our future to be negotiated on terms we did not write," they declared. The partnership deepened. LNG agreements, Arctic energy investments, joint insurance structures, coordinated shipping fleets. Every tanker carried more than oil. It carried a message. Sovereignty could triumph over intimidation. A landmark announcement confirmed it. India had officially become Russia's largest oil buyer. Stock markets trembled. Diplomats scrambled. Analysts recalculated. Power was flowing not from west to east, but from north to south. An international summit in Addis Ababa cemented the shift. African, Asian, and Latin American leaders prioritized intra-South trade, energy security, climate resilience, and independent financial mechanisms. Africa recognized India's stance not as rebellion, but leadership aligned with its own path toward self-determination. Months passed. Tankers continued their steady pilgrimage. India's economy surged. Russia stabilized. Africa gained leverage. Global power became distributed, multidirectional, and multipolar. It all began with a simple, bold decision: to buy oil against pressure, against expectation, against the gravitational pull of old empires. An Indian oil tanker sailed under the golden sunrise, carrying millions of barrels of crude and the autonomy of a rising world. India had stood firm. Russia had adapted. Africa was awakening. Together, a new global chapter had begun, one forged in the determined hearts of the global South. A world where pressure no longer dictated destiny, where sovereignty could not be bought, and where power flowed southward, outward, and forward. The shift was irreversible. The age was multipolar, and the South had risen. The winter winds sweeping across the Eurasian plains carried a different kind of chill, one not born of weather, but of shifting power. From Moscow to Delhi, from Washington to Abuja, from Beijing to Brasilia, the world could feel it, a quiet tremor running beneath governments, markets, and embassies. Something enormous was moving. Something old was cracking. In diplomatic circles, the conversation had changed. Not long ago, the question had been how quickly Russia would be isolated. Now, the world was asking something very different. Why was India becoming Russia's biggest oil buyer despite relentless pressure from the United States? The answer did not lie in simple economics. It lay in a transformation much deeper, shaped by independence, necessity, and the rising confidence of the global South. In the sprawling Strategic Command Center in New Delhi, screens glowed with maps, shipping routes, currency charts, and energy forecasts. Analysts observed the Indian Ocean in real-time, tankers slowly cutting across the waves, their destinations glowing faintly on digital screens. Some moved from Vladivostok toward Chennai. Others drifted through the Suez Canal toward Gujarat. A handful were taking the long route around Africa, avoiding conflict zones and choke points. It was a complex orchestra of steel and sea, and India conducted it with calculated precision. Officials stood in careful silence as the country's leadership entered the room. The atmosphere tightened with expectation. The challenge before them wasn't merely about buying cheaper oil. It was about resisting the gravitational pull of old powers and asserting a new vision for global order. One advisor summarized the situation succinctly. The pressure is escalating. Sanctions, indirect threats, diplomatic messages. The United States is pushing hard. They believe isolating Russia will tilt global influence back in their favor. But the world isn't aligned like before. If we comply, we weaken ourselves. If we resist, we redefine the global balance. The leadership remained quiet, absorbing the gravity of the decision. India's historical relationship with Russia was not one of transaction, but cooperation. Technology, defense, science. Decades of shared projects had built a foundation the West had often overlooked. Now, with global markets in turmoil, Russia leaned toward India with open access, steep discounts, and the promise of strategic reciprocity. Continue the purchases, the leadership finally instructed, and make the logistics permanent. We will create an energy corridor that strengthens us and strengthens the South. Silence fell, then a quiet nod rippled across the room. A global power shift had begun. Washington felt the tremor almost instantly. Inside high-level rooms filled with policy advisors, the frustration was palpable. India was supposed to be a partner aligned with Western strategic interests. Instead, it was buying oil in volumes never seen before, redirecting tankers, reconfiguring ports, and even repurposing old refineries to handle new grades of Russian crude. What unsettled Western officials most wasn't India's defiance, it was India's confidence. There was no apology, no hesitation, no diplomatic softening, just an immovable position based on national interest. In a heated meeting, an American strategist slammed a dossier onto the table. This isn't just about oil. This is about influence. India is saying it will not bend to us. If this continues, the entire global South might follow. Across Africa, Asia, and Latin America, governments watched India with quiet admiration. Many were tired of choosing between competing superpowers. They saw in India a model of what autonomy could look like. Strategic, fearless, and grounded in multipolar vision. Africa, especially, felt its own pulse quicken. If India could stand firm, why couldn't Africa? Why couldn't the continent use its own resources, sun, wind, minerals, markets to rewrite global supply chains? Why couldn't African nations negotiate with strength, rather than pleading for relief? India's decision was an indirect call to rise, and Africa heard it. Meanwhile, far away from diplomatic corridors, Russian ports thundered with new life. At the frigid docks of Primorsk and Ust-Luga, cranes swung like armored giants, lifting barrels of crude toward tankers waiting in the icy water. Inside Russia's energy ministry, a senior official traced a finger across a map connecting Russia to India, stretching through northern oceans, around the Cape of Good Hope, and across the Arabian Sea. Trade with Europe is collapsing, he muttered. But India has opened the door wider than anyone expected.